Welcome to the latest episode of the Autocar Business Changemakers podcast in association with Tomorrow's Journey. I'm joined as ever in the studio by CEO of Tomorrow's Journey, Chris Kirby. Today, big topic, big name from a big company. Derek de Bono from Valeo is joining us. You are boss of software-defined vehicles at Valeo. Firstly, thank you for joining us to tackle what I'm sure will be an easy topic to condense into 35, 40 minutes. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you do and what Valeo does?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for having me, first of all. And it's great to be here today. My job at Valeo is really to push the transformation towards what we call a software-defined vehicle at Valeo. Valeo is a traditional automotive tech company. So we supply a lot of technology from headlights and wipers to thermal management, electric powertrains, and of course, everything to do with automated vehicles or semi-automated vehicles, all the sensors and the beeping that goes around the car. So we're very much involved in the transformation towards new mobility, whether that mobility be electric or whether it be more autonomous. We are at the heart of all that transformation.
We talk about it a lot, software-defined vehicles. I don't know if we've ever come so close as to actually define the concept. Mm-hmm. It's episode 12 and we're defining it now. But why do you think we're only just now starting to talk about software-defined vehicles? Cars have had software in them for decades.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when people say, but Valeo, what's the relationship between you and software? We've been doing software in vehicles for over 30 years. And a lot of the electronics in cars today has a lot of software already in it. The big difference in the change towards a software-defined vehicle is that we're sort of trying to project what we want in the future, and then making sure that we have the hardware in the vehicle to deliver the overall expectation, especially the end user expectation of what the vehicle should be in the future. Mm. So the easiest way that I like to describe a software-defined vehicle is one that can be updated and could grow with you as you own the vehicle for several years. Mm. Vehicles up to this point, they might have a lot of software, but that software doesn't typically change from when you roll off the assembly line or you pick up your car at the dealership. A software-defined vehicle is a connected car that has a lot of computing power in the vehicle. And ideally, what I like to say is the car is at its worst when you actually pick it up. And then through different updates and improvements and adding different applications to do different functions of the vehicle, you're improving the car, you're personalizing the car. It is becoming really more what you expect of your mobility device or your car of the future.
I think that's an interesting thing, Derek. I'm glad you mentioned the line that you used when we were having the briefing call, because I didn't want to steal it from you, but I thought that was like a really clever way of explaining that difference, right? Because I guess going back 10 years or even like with kind of the old generation of vehicles, the day you get the car is the best it will ever be, right? And exactly. It's slowly getting more and more out of date. And the idea that actually today's car and the car of the future is something that when you get it, and then when you eventually sell that car, get rid of it, return it, is actually going to be in a better condition or more advanced than when you bought it. Is that kind of, I guess, for the layman in the conversation, kind of the best way of framing that change, that transformation we're going through?
Exactly. I think the thing we're going to miss is the new car smell. So we're going to have to figure out how to
develop a spray for that.
Yeah. Bit of coding.
But it's exactly that. It's the idea, even with your mobile phone, the factory reset is really the basic level of the functions you have in the phone. And then everything you add to that is really, you're adding what applications you need and you use in your phone. Mm-hmm. You'll do the exact same thing in the car in the future.
Yeah, and are some of the limitations a little bit like, I think using the phone comparisons are a really interesting one, because you do in an iPhone, for example, you have a phone for 2 or 3 years on a contract. You get the update every year and it adds new features, but eventually the kind of software outgrows the hardware in effect. So it does that become almost like the limiting factor of vehicles going forward, that we have to figure out how we get that, but how do we prepare a car for the hardware, for the software?
It's a great question, and I think that's where the comparison between a smartphone and a car really falls down. A smartphone has one ECU, a car has many, nearly 100 ECUs in the vehicle today. Of course, we're trying to group them together into much more powerful ECUs in the future. But the fact that you only have a phone for 2 or 3 years and you're happy to exchange it, it doesn't mean that you're going to be happy to get rid of your car after 2 or 3 years. A car typically lasts for 12, 13 years. EVs today will probably last even longer because there's even less that will go wrong with it. So as an industry, we have to anticipate. And we have to make sure that the computing power in the vehicle, the software architecture in the vehicle will allow it to be scaled up as the car gets older. You might be able to add more computing power, or there might be a way of exchanging and pulling out the processor you have in the vehicle and adding a new one with more memory in the future. I'm not sure that we will accept just to throw away our car after 2 or 3 years like we do a phone. So the issue of scalability and upgradability is essential for the future of automotive.
Yeah, it's a thing that we've touched on a number of times on the podcast about cars sort of becoming more interchangeable as they grow. Because as we said, that idea of a historic car almost being limited by the technology. At some point you would say, okay, well, this car, the engine is dead, it doesn't run properly, and the technology is really out of date. It doesn't have Bluetooth. I mean, it's got a cassette player, it's got a CD player, it's got to go through that process. But now we're kind of in an era where that's less the case, particularly with electric cars. So do you see a situation where, I guess there's probably two parts to it, thinking about the hardware, where cars are built with more hardware than they need on day one, it's almost like the future proofing, but also that ability, which you briefly touched on, of being able to upgrade parts of the hardware as well, because we do see a lot more with mobile phones, again, going back to that analogy, that there's upcycling of them. So when you give your phone back, when you trade it in with Apple or whatever, it doesn't go in the bin, it gets taken away, they take all the bits out of it, do some stuff and make a different thing with it. So do you see that kind of that trend probably on both sides happening with the car?
I think definitely on both sides. I think on things you can't see, more on the powertrain side, I think you will have more power in the vehicle than you need when you first purchase a vehicle. And through subscription models or new business models that we're working on now as an industry, you'll be able to add more power. It's not that you're actually changing the electric motor in the vehicle. It's that the electric motor could do more than you signed up for when you bought the car. So I think the invisible, you will have upsizing potential. On the visible, the whole area of the human machine interface or the user experience in the car, I think we will get to a point where through design, things will be changeable. I don't think that we will accept a car that has a 10-year-old screen or maybe the seats or the interface or how you sit in the car will change in time. We're not quite there yet. I think the business models around that are a little complicated. But if you keep a car for 10, 12, 14 years, there are elements of the car that need to be upgraded. On the software side, it's no problem. We're creating the interface through over-the-air updates. We're creating really the computing power and the memory to be able to deal with that. But then the last element that might have a little question mark around it is, what about the things you touch? And we saw, I think at the Beijing Auto Show just recently, Xiaomi launched their vehicle, and they had the central display, and they had things that touch that are basically plug and play, and you can add them afterwards, or you can change them when you want. I think having a design more adapted to consumer electronics probably will be a way that some OEMs will go in the future.
And there are big sustainability implications around this as well, aren't they? As we approach the age of cars needing to live longer because of the raw materials in their battery, as battery life improves in electric cars, people are going to start keeping their cars for maybe twice the length of time they're currently keeping them on a PCP scheme. I know some manufacturers are talking about, ultimately you could own your car for 15 years. That's what they want to achieve to reduce their environmental footprint. So do you think the ultimate ambition with that in mind is to make it so that people can have a new car that is 15 years old, apart from tyre wear and the seat bolsters and everything? You think that's the mentality that we need to start approaching?
Definitely. I think I would probably use the near new car for 15 years because there's certain elements that they're always going to feel, the new car smell, you can't replace that. Or picking up a car at the dealership is sort of, I think, an emotional moment in the car purchase. But I think the car has to be able to evolve with you. I think we talked about having parts of the car that are maybe the hardware is a higher level than we bought for initially, and we can upgrade that through software. But I think other elements will definitely have to move with the car, for sure.
I'm going to put you on the spot slightly. I'm going to ask you a question. I get put in front of UX people a lot, people who design user interfaces in new cars, and they're always shouting about the new software capabilities of that car and the over-the-air updates, what that allows. And my question is always, what more do I want my car to do that it doesn't do already? I don't need it to cook my dinner for me. I don't need it to load the dishwasher, that sort of thing. How much further can we go from a tangible standpoint that consumers are actually going to notice in terms of software in cars? What is that next level functionality?
Yeah, and I think it goes a bit to the hidden. For sure, we can go into new functions and new experiences in the car that we can't think of today. I think one of the coolest ones that we're working on is really with the gaming industry and how we could actually stream the video feeds as you're driving into a game that you're playing in the vehicle. Okay, so the environment of the game is actually the real environment that you're driving through at the time. I think that's really cool, and I think that
can open up very, very sick. I've done that before.
It's surprisingly we thought as well what they'll do to car sickness, but because the latency is almost dead on.
It's extremely impressive.
It actually makes it really good in terms of car sickness. So we're looking at that. Some stuff around that is pretty fun, but the most basic function that I think that is upgradable through software today. The two examples that I love the most, one is powertrain. You might buy your car with a 200 kilowatt electric motor because it's exactly what you need when you bought the car. But the car company will put in a 300 kilowatt electric motor. So a bit, and maybe a few months down the line, you're going on vacation, you want to tow a trailer, you need a bit more power, you can subscribe and add more power to the vehicle. Something that you could never do before, and something that is enabled purely by software and over-the-air updates if you have the hardware in the car. The other one I really like is on lighting. Today, most cars have low, medium, high lighting trim when you buy the car. So, of course, the high-end trim always looks nicest with the vehicle, but it's expensive, and you might not be able to sign up for that high-end lighting right away. So you're satisfied with the low-end trim as you live in a city like London, where you have a lot of natural lighting at night. But then you're going on vacation as well, or you moved a bit further out, and the light at night is not that great. Well, you can improve your lighting on your car through natural subscriptions and that as well. So I think there's a lot we can do. Some on the fun side, some on the pure, how could I make my car upgradable over time on the pure functions that we know of? And then why don't we just do some surprise and delight and see what the programmers, the app builders out there are doing. When we first had the first smartphone, there were no apps. There was no there was no app store.
Probably people are asking the same question. What more do I want my phone to do? I'm going to make phone calls and send SMSs.
Yeah, this is true. There's one of my colleagues always uses this brilliant analogy. Someone comes up to him and says, "Oh, I just want a fridge. I just want it to keep my food cold." Yeah. You don't. You want it to light up when you open the door. You want it to keep your vegetables crisp at the bottom. You want it to dispense water. Perhaps consumers don't realise necessarily what they expect of a car in this day and age, I guess.
Well, until someone's done it, you haven't thought about it. And I think that's where we are a bit on the apps for on the user experience side.
Actually, that reminds me. You spoke to my editor recently for a separate interview. You mentioned something really interesting about Tesla sort of kickstarting this school of thought with apps in cars and the subscription-enabled services. Do you think they are still the benchmark in that sphere? Do you think other manufacturers have caught up? And how have they sort of encouraged the growth of that market?
Yeah, I think we should recognize that they kickstarted it, as well as the performance EV. They were at the forefront of that. With the fact that they were able to develop their car from a clean sheet of paper, they put in a high power computer into it, and naturally they update the vehicle over time. This was quickly followed by a lot of the new Chinese OEMs, who also had the same sort of mindset: a clean sheet of paper, let's go. If it worked for Tesla, it will work for us.
Yep.
So we see a lot of Chinese vehicles with many sensors and cameras and radars on the vehicle that they will then use over time by adding new functions to the vehicle that we don't know of today. What we've seen is a real catch-up from the traditional OEMs. I think most of the traditional OEMs will be launching their first SDV-ready or central compute vehicles in the next 2-3 years. Starting in 2025, we'll start to see 26, 27. What is interesting is if you consider Tesla still a bit premium, you will start to have the mainstream OEMs at launch as well. We've announced cooperation with 2 OEMs. We're working on BMW's central compute, which will launch in 2025, and we're working with on the more mainstream side with Renault on their central compute as well, which is a couple of years later. So.
And do you think that you touched briefly on the kind of sensors and things in the vehicle, and maybe going back a little bit to the hardware question as well, but do you think that autonomy and the autonomous nature of cars is something that's also going to be there'll be a benefit to the software derived element of the vehicle? So obviously a Tesla now is able to pretty much drive autonomously in lots of scenarios, but either isn't allowed to or maybe isn't quite there for certain areas. But a lot of that limitation, I guess, is software, potentially computing power and other things. Do we see that as a thing that, cars like Teslas are going to come with all of the cameras and LiDAR and everything installed, and over time their level of autonomy or functionality of level of autonomy will increase? Do you think that's an area that we'll see, or does it need significant hardware upgrades as well to kind of enable some of that?
I think, Chris, I think the way you describe it is really plausible. I think the question is, what is the hardware set that you need to be fully autonomous, or level 4 autonomous, let's say. If you have a hardware set that you won't move, and you'll say, I'll develop my software and my autonomous system around that set hardware, then I think you can upgrade the car in the future. If every time you're making changes to your hardware set, then you're going to have legacy vehicles that will not have the hardware set you need for the autonomous. But if you see a standard LiDAR, maybe 4 or 5 cameras, radars, ultrasonics, building what you call your level 2 plus 3, 4 hardware set, and then the passage from one level to another would be done through algorithms and through software that you can upgrade to the vehicle. You can also see that, Felix, as you mentioned, what could you bring to the car afterwards? If you had the hardware in the car and you bought it as an L2 plus, sort of like a semi-autonomous vehicle, then when you went, when you were, you knew you were driving to Spain for summer vacation, it's a 15-hour drive. It would be great to have level 4 autonomous in your car on that drive. Even if it was highway only, then you can subscribe to it and you can buy that package and you can go off on vacation with that. I would see that as a very plausible and even a very desirable subscription that you would buy in the future.
Yeah, and I think also thinking about the upgrades as well, it could be that, to use a Tesla example, but a Tesla Model 3 today that's got a certain level of equipment, maybe that isn't enough the hardware isn't enough to enable level 4 autonomy, let's say. But if that car, when the software is there, if the hardware needs updating, when we talked previously about cars in between ownerships, again back to this sort of 15-year life, it might not be one owner, so you have your car for 3 years, it goes back. Someone comes in and says, I bought this car and it's worth £10,000, but if I spend £3,000 on it, I can take it from level 2 to level 4 autonomy by changing the hardware, but also changing the seats, upgrading the screen. I've now made it, although it's still not new, I've upgraded it to the next tier. You can kind of add value, like you would with a house or something if you're upgrading it, which is just something you couldn't really do today, unless you're in the kind of modifying, type world. So again, that could potentially be a sort of use case, and thinking about the extra the new business models, the extra revenue streams for people like the dealerships who maybe are going to get less service revenue from electric vehicles, or where the software is being updated.
Well, I think you're starting to see central architectures that are scalable. So you can add compute power maybe 3, 4, 5 years afterwards by a cartridge or a different sort of mechanism in the vehicle that could be done at a dealership or on the aftermarket. So when you bought that function from your OEM, it might need a cartridge to go with it. So you plug the cartridge in. Now you have the compute power you need to power your level 3 or level 4 autonomous vehicle. That could be part of it. On the sensor suite, I think something's really interesting happening in Europe. I think we're pushing the safety level higher, what we call the ADAS, a safety level higher. So you require a certain number of sensors. You require interior camera monitoring systems. You require a certain level of connectivity. All those sensors that are required now in Europe for safety are a large part of the sensor suite that you need for autonomous vehicles. So the final gap that you'll have, I think, will be smaller and smaller as time goes on. So we are getting the hardware. We have the scalability in the central compute. We're not that far from the algorithms and the software that needed to power it. So I think you'll start to see a bit of a convergence on there and some interesting business models to go with it.
Yeah, so become some kind of critical mass, because again, you could see that the European government could sign off Tesla software version 8.7 as their this is allowed to be level 4. Any car with that can then do it, and if your car isn't, you can take it in to be upgraded, and you get that. And there's some costs. You can see that kind of was signed off at this level, and maybe some of the cars are below, but it would operate.
But this is interesting, isn't it? Because you mentioned ADAS. I won't fully open the can of worms, but I will crack it open a little bit. There's a growing backlash against ADAS, particularly in the UK, where our roads perhaps aren't necessarily in the condition that allows these systems to perform as they are meant to. How do you account for changes in taste when developing new software like this? You could invest millions in developing level 4 functionality, but in 5 years' time, manufacturers might have stopped shouting about offering that because consumers have simply told them they don't want it, they don't need it, and maybe it's got more relevance to the mobility as a service, the ride sharing platforms that we talk about a lot on this podcast. How do you account for that when you're planning the next generation of software in cars?
Yeah, I think our focus as a company is really on cars owned by people. So we're much more focused on L2, L2 plus. We have L3 through our LiDAR. So we're much more focused on that. L4 is a bit of a different market. It's the robotaxi market. But I think you'll have a lot of the algorithms and a lot of the software being developed by them that might enable future L4 vehicles that are maybe more en masse. But our focus is definitely on the L2, L2 plus, L3 consumer market more than on the robotaxi market.
Yeah, there is some of that, I think, when technology gets introduced, not just in auto, but you definitely see it in auto, where it gets sometimes introduced a bit too early. There's a little bit about consumers like not knowing what they want until they have it, but also starting to have things that they don't fully understand how to use. And I like pretty much in every podcast use my mum as an example. But their new BYD Dolphin, I saw her yesterday, and she was saying they've had to turn off the kind of auto braking thing because in Milton Keynes there's lots of roundabouts, and when you start to pull away at the junction and there's a car coming, although you're pulling away to come behind that car, it slams the brakes on. Right. And she's just like, I can't handle it. So I'm 73 or whatever she is. Like, I've got to figure out how to turn this stuff off because it's maybe not quite introduced at the right level, and no one's really explained the benefit. And I'm going, don't turn off the safety measures in your car, but it's not practical in that use case.
I was in a car a while ago. I won't name the brand, but it might become obvious from what I'm saying. And it puts a sort of a 3D render of the vehicles that are around you on the digital data cluster. And there were there were 3 horses in front of me. And the display showed these 3 motorbikes. And I thought, I'll just cleverly edge round these motorbikes. And then the car obviously thinks, why are you moving out of your lane? Because there's motorbikes in front of you. And it's then that you start thinking, this software isn't quite ready, and particularly, in the UK where horses are on the roads. That's maybe a good example. Milton Keynes a brilliant example of Nissan actually says that Milton Keynes is the hardest environment in the world that it tests cars because of all the roundabouts, which is strange when they go to northern Sweden and everything for cold weather testing. But,
we challenged that with the roundabouts in Paris, especially the Arc de Triomphe. I think it used to be 7 or 8 lanes wide. It was also a challenge. Could you autonomously drive through the Arc de Triomphe? But I think the wonderful part about that is in the past, you would say, okay, my system doesn't work, I'll turn it off. But over-the-air updates are happening so quickly with software that if we detected that it didn't work at a roundabout because the car was coming from a different angle, that would be part of the update that would happen at the OEM. And I think you see that in your smartphone. You see it with OEMs that are at the forefront of SDV, like with Tesla. And it's sort of the way software is built and designed is that whatever industry you're in, as you learn more, you make little micro improvements, and it's better and better. That's why when you have to hit the factory reset button, you never really want to do it because so much has happened since the phone was built. And I think it will happen with cars as well. I personally really like what we call the situational awareness, when you can actually see what your sensors are seeing on the vehicle. It gives you confidence that your ADAS system is actually detecting what you're seeing in the vehicle, if it's detecting things properly.
It'd be interesting to drive just using that, not looking out the windscreen. That'd be,
Do you think it'd be fine most of the time? I actually saw a viral video recently of somebody who was parked at a train crossing, and the Tesla picked it up as a load of lorries.
Infinite lorries just zooming past.
It's amusing. But you can see in that situation where the sensitivity is probably not quite right in that car or whatever the mode is, and you could see an update coming in. And and probably not specifically on that example, but we touched a couple of times on the business model side. How do you see it developing from kind of a monetary perspective? So we're talking about these updates that are being provided. Hardware updates is a bit more obvious because it's a sort of direct, tangible cost. How are you guys seeing the consumer appetite for, pay to have some extra power, pay for your heated seats, an example that we've used a few times before.
That's I think that's the one that people most associate with this, isn't it? The infamous heated seat subscription.
So what are your thoughts on kind of how that's going to develop? Because it's definitely a divisive subject in the industry and with consumers.
For sure. I think the heated seats is a great example of what not to do. I think it was meant well. It was meant to sort of monetize a function in the vehicle, and we won't charge you for it when you buy the car, but if you want it, then we'll charge you for it. Except if it's something that's always been part of the car, it's hard to do that with it. I think monetizing through a subscription model where you can add and remove as you see fit over the life of the vehicle will be accepted as ones that we've used and we see with music like Spotify or Netflix or any other sort of system
with your Apple
with application
storage or iCloud and those things.
I think it's one, as long as you can add and remove, I think it's fine. And if consumers can see value in adding it, if it's something that is essentially a commodity, I think it's a lot harder. But we will make mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake. You learn and you see what worked and what didn't. And, I think the models will be fine-tuned after that. I think we can't be scared to make mistakes. Because I think as an industry, we're not used to subscribing to new services. We're used to selling a car, you drive off the lot, and you can maybe add modifications to it afterwards and make it a better vehicle. But we're not used to subscribing to something. So I think the auto industry will adapt, we'll learn, we'll make mistakes, and I think we'll add a lot of value in the future.
That in particular, that heated seat example, and lots of other examples like it that continue. The headlights are a really good example. They are all features of SDVs that are aimed at privately owned vehicles, cars that you keep for a long time. But as we transition towards new modes of car, usership is a phrase we use quite a lot. So subscription models, different forms of leasing, ride sharing schemes, they are becoming more and more popular. So how do you ensure that the services enabled by SDVs are relevant in that context as well?
I think they match really, really well, actually. And we talked a bit about the second-hand market or third-hand market. And if the car has more hardware in it than the first person paid for it, then you could make different packages for the second and third life by turning different features on and actually increasing the value in the vehicle post-lease by just adding functionality that the first leasee didn't pay for it. So I think if you have hardware in the vehicle that could be enabled or turned on and off, you might be able to fine-tune the vehicle through the second and third life to what the actual aftermarket needs at that point. So maybe it's flooded with vehicles that are fully loaded, but that have a higher price point, and you want to lower the price point, you can turn things off and plug it into a different sweet spot in the market. You can have fun. You can play with it. It's not really our business, but I can see people creating models around there to really maximize what vehicle with what trim level, what function level you need for different segments of the market at different times.
Definitely could see that from kind of that upgradable point of view. If you're a leasing company and you've had 50 Teslas returned this month, and you go, okay, well, look, actually, the value, I can put 20 of these in as they are, you know, just as a normal second-hand car. But you know what? I can't get rid of all 50 because there's not the market for it. But why don't I take a portion of these away? We'll spend £2,000 on them and upgrade features, both software and I guess hardware as well. And then that creates a different price point and a different segmentation. And I think from a business model point of view today in the market, in the industry, maybe more so than the market, I can see that really working well. I mean, that could operate literally today. I think part of the challenge, and this is moving a bit more away from where you guys are, but it has an impact. The challenge with the subscription model to consumers is back to a thing we also talk about a lot, which is about who the customer has a relationship with. So the problem you're going to have is that a customer, when they lease from Volkswagen Financial Services, they think they're buying from Volkswagen, but actually they bought from a dealer. They're leasing by a different company. They don't have a relationship with Volkswagen apart from a warranty, even that's via the dealer. So then if Volkswagen are trying, as the OEM, want to monetize the heated seats, as you use the same analogy, they've got to pay Volkswagen, but actually their lease is with Volkswagen Financial Services. So their lease might be with ALD or Arval or someone like that. So how... it's going to be really difficult, I think, for customers to be able to like combine those values, because they go, the car used to cost me £400 a month, but now I'm paying £300 because I don't have those features. But then next month I want to add £15 for this and £15 for that. That makes sense if it's in one place. But if you're paying £300 a month to Arval and then Volkswagen say, oh, well, the OEM wants £50 a month for you for the heated seats, and I think consumers are going to find that really hard to get their head around. And that's our problem, not theirs. But they're going to go, didn't I buy the car from Volkswagen? I don't really understand. So I feel like there's this bit of like, how do you make it make sense to the consumer in the complicated world that we've created?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think most car companies are developing, really spending a lot of money on the digital life of the vehicle through applications and functions like phone as a key and adding as much as you can to develop that loyalty between the end consumer and the car company. So a lot of people already, when they buy a car today, they already have the app just to be able to link the car to your phone or whatever digital life you have. So that's happening already. The fact that you buy your car from one and your service from somebody else, it's a step in automotive, but we do that already with our television. We do it already with our phone. So I think there's a natural link. The car companies definitely want to have that link to the end consumer, and I think there's a lot of value to that. They know what sort of features you want. They know what apps you're putting on the car, what functions you value when you added the more power or the light. In the winter season, are you seeing subscriptions go up for lighting? Maybe there's some clever other features that they can push to you at the same time. So I think I see this as a benefit for the car companies.
Definitely.
I think they are dying to have that a stronger bond with the actual people who not only buy the car the first time, but use it over the next 10 years, which is the part that they lose contact with.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really, really important. And you can definitely see it happening more. I think some of the first car derived apps that were coming into the market are pretty terrible, but actually now, particularly on EVs, because you use them a lot for managing charging and other things, it's definitely a lot more popular. So you create that link with the customer. There's also a bit of the fight that happens in the industry of who owns the customer. Again, a lot of leasing companies were very reluctant to let their customers sign up for this. So there's this whole bit of does the OEM sell the upgrade via the leasing company or this kind of thing? But I do see as people get more and more used to downloading kind of apps and things like that, it can definitely be more, it's only a case of uploading your payment details into that. It's about finding the right thing to get the customer. And as we said about the heated seats is a really terrible first example. Maybe in 10 years time when people are doing it, you kind of
roll it back out in 5 years.
But like if it was, you're going to find the thing that really adds value to the consumer, where they're like, okay, I really need that thing today and I'm really happy to pay this for 1 month. And then they get their head around the fact that they can start to buy it. But I think if you're charging them for the thing that they think they should have already, it's a bit of a tricky starting point, isn't it?
Well, I think you mentioned the cloud storage before.
Yeah.
You never knew you needed cloud storage until you signed up for it, and you're like, this is great. And I think you'll have those features as well. I think there will be competition for the data of the vehicle between everybody, basically, who has their hands in automotive. I think we'll start understanding that the more we collaborate and share the data, the better features we can develop, and the more everybody will make. We just have to be very careful about the protection of the, I guess, what do you call it, proprietary data. And
this is a massive concern,
hear
isn't
some
it?
people giving it to insurance companies, and I think if you break that trust, it's really hard to rebuild. So if we give our proprietary data, you expect it to be closed, like it is in consumer goods.
Yeah, of course. Well, Derek, we'll bring this to a close fairly shortly, but just give us an idea of the evolution of the sector that you work in. Who are the disruptors? How do you disrupt this industry? And what's the state of play in the vehicle software industry at the moment?
Yeah, I'm going to go a bit large because I think automotive, it's been around for many years, and everyone thought, like, how could you possibly innovate in automotive? The last 10, 15 years have been absolutely fantastic. We've seen the huge transition towards electrification. So it brought in a lot of new players. The barriers to entry changed because electric motors are a lot easier to build than combustion engines are. And now we have all the tech giants, the Googles and the Baidus and the NVIDIAs, Qualcomms, everyone's coming into automotive. And the progression, the speed of development and innovation has been absolutely fantastic in automotive. So I think as an industry, it's never been more uncertain and never been more interesting than it is right now. And I think the sort of products that end consumers will have as a result of all this real melting pot of innovation and of ideas in the next 3, 4, 5 years will be fantastic as well.
When's the next step change, would you say? The cars that we're driving on the road, when's the next, the big breakthrough coming next?
The big breakthrough that I am dying to see is really Highway L4. So being able to say, okay, I'm not even looking for urban. The fight was for urban for a long time. I'm not even talking about urban. But if I can get the car into the highway and to say, okay, take me to the outskirts of the city 4 hours away, I'll be ecstatic. So and I think we're starting to see that now in China. They're really pushing for the highway and then the urban. We're seeing tech giants like Google, Waymo, GM Cruise, they're more or less already there. I think the step probably for end consumers like you and I, I'm more optimistic than most. I say by probably the next, say 4 or 5 years. I've been caught saying 3, 4, but I'd say 4 or 5 years, and I think we'll start to see it. And a lot of it is because of that hardware set that is coming into the vehicle already now. I didn't want to get into technical terms, but GSR2 is the big regulation in Europe that is pushing a lot of the hardware set. The only thing we're missing is the LiDAR. So if OEMs invest and put the LiDAR in the vehicle, they'll be able to sell the highway subscription for L4 and then in the almost near future. And if you had an L4 on the highway, I call that a train of one. Now we drag ourselves with our bags and our children to the train station, and we jump on the train and we go 400 or 500 kilometers on vacation. If you could just, for the same price of that train or less, subscribe to that service on your car, load up your car and just go, and 4 or 5 hours you're not even touching the wheel and it's taking you there. I think that's a huge customer benefit to that. So
and
that's my dream.
That definitely feels like one of the big entries into people into those subscription models, right? And if while you're there and you're buying this feature that would be incredible, particularly for those long every now and again type journeys, then if you said, while you're there, would you like to add heated seats for an extra £5 and add entertainment for the kids and whatever, you can see that starting to be like, oh yeah, sure, because I'm really now excited about this trip and I can hands off the wheel. You're going to introduce the family fun game app on the thing. Oh yeah, cool. That's could be
or
really
if you needed streaming music, if streaming video because you weren't driving anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
streaming games for your kids in the back. It opens up a huge opportunity. I don't think we're that far. The L5 or the full L4 urban highway, we're a bit further. But the pure highway only, I don't think we're that far away.
Really, So, I came down in my Polestar today. It does, the adaptive cruise and keeping in the lane thing is absolutely great. And the amount of stress that reduces. So just to be able to go that step further, whether you don't have to worry about having your hand on the steering wheel. The technology is obvious, it's there, it's working, it's operating.
It just needs to be
next
foolproof.
little final bit, foolproof, regulatory wraps. And that's definitely a thing that you could see people going, I'm willing to pay for that to make my journey easier, or to make whether it's a commuting thing or whether it's a holiday thing. So definitely fascinating.
Well, if you're looking for cars to be more appealing than trains, I think you're pushing on an open door in the UK. Someone who got a train to work today, I think I can say that walking would be preferable to what I did this morning. But there we go. We'll bring it to a close there. Otherwise, we'll end up talking for hours. I think we covered a lot of ground there. Really great to have you on, Derek. Thanks for coming in. I know you're rushing off to Paris, are you now?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to Paris.
There we go. How are you getting there?
The train to Paris. The Eurostar will take
level
me to
4
Paris.
car.
I'm not sure the level 4 going under the tunnel might be a little bit challenging.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we look forward to catching up again soon when there are more developments to discuss. Thanks so much for coming in. Chris, thanks for joining us as ever. Thank you to you for watching and listening. You can catch up next time on the Changemakers podcast. You can find all the episodes on the Autocar Business website. Thank you very much. Goodbye.